Interestingly, we keep hearing that there's an attempt to bring CHOP down from within, that protesters want to walk away, but they're being directed in a particular area that doesn't really help Joe Biden. They're being directed to support him, which means, of course, that Donald Trump can very easily, not fake news it, but he's going to be very able to draw a straight line between Joe Biden and the type of lunacy that took over that part of America.
Well, it is Donald Trump's narrative, law and order, national security, and it does, you're absolutely right, it does play into that. And I think that's part of the reason why we've seen a fall away in the level of violence and the numbers in the protests over the last couple of weeks. It was because all of that violence was seen to help Donald Trump, and clearly that wasn't the motivation of a large number of protesters. But the fact is, you know, just to get onto the politics of it, Donald Trump needs to have some clear cut-through narrative at the moment. He is behind in key states. I don't think there's any doubt about that. If an election were held today, he would lose. But he has a chance to get back on track. He just has to become a little more disciplined about what he says and the campaign events that he holds. Joe Biden is got a small target strategy, and it's working. The small target strategy is working for him. Donald Trump's in the ring throwing punches, but there's no one there to hit. And in the meantime, the coronavirus is becoming a more and more dominant story here in the US. Because what's happening is all of those small businesses that the president gave hope to, that they would come back, roaring back, reopen, are now being shut down again. So, you know, yesterday I went to buy some stuff for my kitchen. I couldn't find a shop that was open, and eventually got to a Bloomingdale's 5 miles away, and it was completely empty. Wow. Completely empty. And I just thought to myself that this talk about an economic recovery here is you know, well away from retail, well away from tourism. And unless the president can find a way to get some economic narrative back, to talk about jobs, to continue about national security, and I know he's being advised to focus on China, then unless he's on those three issues, then Joe Biden's going to continue to lead and will lead the polls. Will lead the polls.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, to me, a path that's obvious here is that because, I mean, if we were going pre-COVID, we were talking about record low unemployment, record number of people with a job, all the diversity issues in and around that. We were talking about a stock market that was surging. So essentially the were you better off than you were 4 years ago question was resoundingly being answered in the yes. So I don't understand how Trump hasn't completely tried to reposition himself as, I'm the only one who can rebuild. Biden's the one who did NAFTA, I'm the one who did the new trade deal. Biden gives in to China, I stand up to China. Instead, it seems like he's been sucked into sort of not just a talk radio vortex, but a particular version of a talk radio vortex that means you only end up talking to, rather than suburban mums, you talk to people who would physically turn up to your rally.
Well, that's right. And I think his narrative is he's just on too many issues. He's just on too many issues. He's got to regroup his team. He needs to listen to his advisors. And because ultimately, as we've talked about before, Paul, you know, the thing that's going to swing independent voters is security, about job security, about national security, about personal security. But the challenge, part of the challenge, which we actually have in Australia as well, when I'm reading about what's happening in South Australia and the controversy about Queensland opening, you've got a federal level of government in both Australia and the United States that is responsible for the economy. Their primary responsibility is the economy and national security. But it's the state leaders that run the health systems. And it's the same here in the US. So you've got this confrontation, if you like, between the leadership at a federal level and focusing on getting the economy back open, and the leadership at a state level that says keep it closed for health reasons. And in America, because there are 50 states, and some of them are run by political opponents, that battle is lost. That battle is lost. And Donald Trump can talk all he wants about the economy and provide support on coronavirus, but it's the state governors that are all over the joint at the moment. And to see Republican governors in Florida and Texas now start to wind back, and they've got no choice, start to wind back the opening. Even in California, the Democrat governor's starting to wind back the opening. That's going to have a big impact on the US economy and the psychology of middle America. So Donald Trump's got to get back in there and own the narrative, and he's not there yet.
Yeah, look, I'd love to ask you about that.
He can win, though. He can
I
win.
agree.
He can win. I mean, you know, there's no doubt about that. I mean, you remember Dukakis was leading George H.W. Bush at the end of July, and of course Hillary Clinton was thumping Trump at the end of July. It can turn, and certainly in this febrile environment it can turn. But he's just got to get more focused on the key issues.
Well, also, this is the thing too. To those that want to write him off or say, that's it, he's done, forking him at the end of June, don't forget, last month, 2.5 million jobs were created in the US. Now, obviously, there'll be some back and forth about, openings but if the story starts to be people getting a job back versus losing them by the tens of millions, but also don't forget too, if there's one thing that is absolute about the Trump candidacy and then presidency, there are 3 news cycles in a day. Like, you would think that the defining issue of 2020 politically would be the potential impeachment of a president. It now feels like a thing that happened so far ago. So the capacity of, and it's I think one of his great campaign strengths, his capacity to be able to change a subject quickly, move to something else, and then, he knew how to sort of like fly fishing, fire up an outrage machine in order to mock the outrage machine in order to give himself strength. It's a capacity he still has. And I think one of the things that he's going to try to go on is, of course, the physicality of Biden and Biden about how not just mental capacity, all the rest of it, but also this fundamental thing about wearing masks or not. Now, Joe Biden has said that he would actually mandate that everyone in the US has to wear a mask. Here's the tape.
You would, in effect, mandate the wearing of masks.
I would do everything possible to make it required that people had to wear masks in public.
So, Joe, in the country of John Wayne, Rambo, Arnold Schwarzenegger, in the country of the UFC and the WWE, I know what all of the different reasons are around masks. But do you think it works for or against Biden to constantly be seen in one?
Well, it depends if coronavirus becomes a bigger and bigger issue. If it's the dominant political issue, it's a bit like lockdown. There'll be community support, and Joe Biden will get support. But if coronavirus is not the main issue, and Joe Biden has to go out and start shaking hands with people, then it's a very different campaigning environment. That's why I wouldn't write off Donald Trump, because everyone around the president. Even if you play golf with the president, everyone around the president has to be tested before they engage with the president. Visitors to the White House, everyone. Whereas the same is not the case with Joe Biden. And sooner or later, he's going to go out and have to shake hands and meet people and hold rallies. Now, if coronavirus just keeps deteriorating, then who knows what it looks like. Bear in mind, Paul, at the moment, less than 1%, even with the horrendous growth in numbers, less than 1% of the American population has had the coronavirus, and just 3% of that 1% have sadly passed away. So the numbers in relation to the coronavirus can grow exponentially. I mean, they can absolutely take off, and still you'll get 4 or 5% of the population only that have had it. So it really comes down to where it impacts. Florida, with a large older population, is very much at risk. The voters in Florida, the numbers in Florida have been deteriorating for Donald Trump. Texas has been a Republican stronghold, and again, because they're zero income tax states, a lot of people go down there to retire, even to Texas. And, they're very vulnerable. And if he can't hold Texas, Florida and Arizona, it's all over. Yeah. So we need to get back on, he needs to get back on the policy track and start focusing on addressing these key issues, even just on a daily basis, a new announcement. You're absolutely right. This guy, President Trump, can control, there's 15 news cycles a day, maybe 20. He can control them all. I've never seen anyone ever do it. But at the moment where there's an overwhelming issue like coronavirus, he just can't get his narrative up.
For obvious reasons, and a life highlight to be able to be there in the Oval Office with your good self and to watch how he managed things, like to explain to people back here, he knew where the camera was for CNN or MSNBC or Fox. He knew where the stills cameras were, so he acted up to them. He knew which message to throw here, throw there. Look, it's an amazing thing to watch in person, as are you, Joe Hockey. And we will look forward to talking to you again next week. All the best, mate.